things. And so when you're still with the birds, yeah.
We're doing our weekend exams right now. And one, the older one has a car, he's out at work. And I would go dinner and I'm not there. It's like a very, very different flow. I'm all over the place now. Yeah.
Oh, that's what you said.
Yeah, like off of North Carolina. And so, you know, the walk home is so relaxed. The walk here where I'm like,
Well, if you're still there, the next time you should let us know, because we go, from your road.
yeah, I said, it's not a fun, you're right. Thank you. Oh, yeah. So they do like the pretty independent and pretty incredible. I'm not getting to school because that's
You're sloppy good, bitch.
Sloppy.
Well, they had to be good. The sloppier, the better.
Hey.
Deserved, is that what you said? Dessert.
That's later.
Goes without saying. Is anything related to a tomato in the food and you're wearing a white shirt? Iron law of the universe.
Oh, it's gonna find you. It's like gravity.
In China, there's like that reddish oil in everything. There's like very almost no dish. You could feel safe one.
Right. Yeah, I think it's tomatoes are genetically programmed. Look for white shirts. With some sort of a survival benefit to that. I don't understand it, but there are many things we don't understand.
I'm sure Rob is interested.
Oh, good. Okay, so let's wait just a moment for Rob.
Yeah, Eileen and Roberta and Michael.
Frank, are you sure you're not impersonating the man from Glad?
I don't know the man from Glad. Who is that?
He was the guy that was selling the Glad trash bags.
Oh, selling Glad trash bags. Oh, yeah. I haven't been introduced. I'm so sorry. The man from Glad. How about that?
I know. My mom left when I was 4, so I was watching the TV all the time.
Hmm.
I remember.
You remember that? I'm glad.
Okay, there you go.
Okay, yeah, so we may as well begin. All right, so just again, just a little retrospective. This book, Profound Buddhism, Kalu Rinpoche, is like a survey, you might say, of the Buddhist path. And he was a lineage holder in what Shangpa, I believe, Kagyu. So again, not to get too deep into the weeds, but in Tibetan Buddhism, you have 4 great traditions, although the Dalai Lama says 5, but you got 4 great traditions, 3 of the new school and 1 of the old school. Old school is Nyingma. The new school is the Sakya, the Kagyu, and the Gelug. So the Dalai Lama is in the Gelug, means, I think, shining virtue. The Sakyas are a familial lineage, but they're known for their great scholarship. Sakya Pandita was one of their great figures. And actually, they have a place down in just north of New York City, I think, in the Catskills. And also one of the first Tibetan Lamas to come to the States was Dejung Rinpoche, who was a highly, highly regarded Lama and scholar. And he had some sort of ad hoc position in Seattle, I think was the University of Washington, actually, if I got the right, but maybe that's not even in Seattle, but don't quote me, it's one of the two, Seattle or the University of Washington, I do believe. But then the Kagyu. So the Kagyu is what we find ourselves in, and there are 12 different schools, subsects, so to speak, within the Kagyu. And I always hesitate to speak like this because people hear all these different sects and it sounds like you're describing sounds like you're describing I don't know, Protestant Buddhism, you know, with all these different groups, but not like that. So whoa, what's that squeak? You okay? All right. At any rate, the Kagyu comes from the Buddha. Vajradhara means holder of the Vajra, and all the symbolism of the Vajra. Then the transmission was to Tilopa, who was this Indian wandering yogi. Then to Naropa, who was like sort of head of Harvard at the time, head of Nalanda University, who then had this interesting encounter with a Dakini, manifesting as an old Indian woman selling tea on the side of the road, and she kind of like bested him in like Dharma combat, and he was very kind of humbled, and then heard this name Tilopa sort of echoing out of the clouds, and had this strong desire to somehow meet this Tilopa, who he didn't know who it was. Eventually did, and practiced with him, and then became the lineage holder, the Kagyu. And so from Vajradhara to Tilopa to Naropa, and then to Marpa, who was a Tibetan who traveled across the Himalaya and became a student of Naropa. Marpa's most famous student was Milarepa, and Milarepa's student next was Gampopa. And then Gampopa had 4 great students, and the Kagyu sort of continued to split out of there. So there are 12 different Kagyu schools. 8 are said to be minor, 4 major. The Drikung Ars, Drikung is an area of Tibet, is one of the major ones, just in terms of number of adherents. I don't know how all this shakes out now. This would have been traditionally, historically, kind of the numbers. But Kalu Rinpoche was a lineage holder in one of those 8, the Shangpu Kagyu. So it's interesting here, at least for me, because I've been trained more in the others, to see the subtle differences in how they approach. But of course, like Gar Rinpoche says, this is all, it's just one diamond, but different facets on this wonderful jewel of the Dharma. So it's not a sectarian thing, although you can always have sectarian people with sectarian minds make anything sectarian. And the Tibetans have gone through this historically too. Most notably in the early 1800s, they had this tremendous called Rinpoche movement. And I think Rinpoche means non-sectarian. But at any rate, there was this movement that took place in Tibet in the early 1800s, where you had teachers going to teachers of different lineage and taking empowerments from them. And almost all the modern lamas consider themselves Rinpoche teachers. And in our particular case, the Drikung is very interesting in that regard because it's said to be the river that has two cherries floating in it. What are those two cherries? Well, Vajradhara and then Kuntuzangpo, Samantabhadra. Because the Drikung way back when had and the highest teachings in the new schools is Mahamudra. But in the old school, the Nyingma, the highest teaching is Dzogchen, great completion, great perfection. And the Drikung had a Dzogchen master become head of the Drikung some 400 years ago or something. So within the Drikung, when people are going on a tantric retreat, for instance, you have a choice. I mean, it depends on the particular lama that you have, but you can either do the fivefold Mahamudra Nundro, or you can do the Yangzab. The Yangzab are these Terma teachings, these treasure teachings that were discovered in a cave called Kir Yangzhang outside of Terdrum in Tibet. And some of you may have seen recently, we had some people from here, including Megan, go with Lama Jorpal, this Ladakhi Lama, to Terdrum years ago. And he asked if people wanted to go up on the mountain where Guru Rinpoche practiced with Yeshe Sogyal, where the Yangzab teachings were found. And of course, people said yes. And then, I don't know, he led people out. I don't know if there was any skillful, crazy wisdom with this or not, but Megan said they were just seemed to be going around and around and around the mountain. One by one, people started to drop off. Ended up with, pardon?
Not off the mountain.
Yeah, right. Dropped off of the parade and ended up with Lama Jorpal, this Tibetan nun, Megan, and was there one other person? I can't remember. But nonetheless, they got up to this cave where they had practiced, and the pictures of it were just, it was like on the moon. I mean, they're way above the tree line, and everything is this gray granite. And here's this little cave, and there's a yak hair rope that's down there. You kind of climb up on this ice. It's actually like a glacier. Looks like a glacier, little glacier coming out of the cave. This very, very ascetic kind of place. But nonetheless, you can do that Nundro. You can do the fivefold Mahamudra. So it's said to the Drikung, in terms of this Rinpoche business, well, we were already experiencing that all the way along because there was, many Nyingma teachings. And interestingly, this continues. I mean, in his lifetime, Gar Rinpoche, of course, as we all know, had all these Kagyu teachers, and was trained, installed in a Kagyu monastery, but a Drika monastery, so it has both of these. But then interestingly, when he was in the prison camp, after the Cultural Revolution, or during the Cultural Revolution, and even before, the great teacher that he had there was a Nyingma teacher, Khenpo Munsel. So the practices that we do here, Yamataka is a Nyingma text, Vajra Kalaya is a Nyingma text, and then I just happened across this kind of introductory summary on the Drikung website, out of India. And it mentioned that Jigten Sumgön, so the Drikung comes from Jigten Sumgön, who was Pagmo Drupa's teacher, who was a student of Gampopa. So Jigten Sumgun, and it says at the age of 8, he had a vision of Yamantaka. So, yeah, it's not a sectarian thing at all. It's just different strokes for different folks. It's different, subtleties in the way that we approach the Dharma. So this text, interesting to me because it's Shangpu Kagyu, which I really know nothing about. But in his presentation, you can see slightly different flavor, which is kind of interesting. But
what's the karma kagyu?
Karma Kagyu is one of the 4 great ones too. So Gampopa had 4 great students. One founded the Drikun Kagyu, Pagmodrupa. Where does it go? 4 great schools: Karma Kagyu, Drikun Kagyu, and the other 2 I don't know. All right. Yeah. So yeah, we're very similar to the Karma Kagyu. You see many of the prayers the same. And for that matter, even with the Gelugpa, years ago, the Dalai Lama was giving something at the Smithsonian, and he had something on the mall in Washington, D.C., and we happened to go down for it. And of course, they had like a rock concert or something. They had big screens up, and so you could see what was going on. He was on a stage, and they had some Gelugpa monks up there. They do that throat.
Yeah, special singing.
Yeah, they were doing their thing, and then they launched into their opening prayers. Exactly our opening prayers. Everything. Yeah. So it's kind of fun.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, so we're on page 58 of Kalu Rinpoche's survey, you might say, in the spacious mind. So again, we started out with self-liberation, and the basic practice there is to do no harm. And how that's done in an inner way is you're just abandoning the afflictive emotions. You learn to recognize the afflictive emotions, and that's more than just emotions, but nonetheless, you recognize these mind states that are problematic, that cause you, that through our self-grasping, are become the triggers for non-virtuous behavior of body, speech, and mind. And so the basic start is just to abandon all of that, just not to be entangled in all that anymore. Then it goes to the conventional Mahayana, which according to this text says is the transformation of the afflictive emotions. The example that's sometimes given, at least in the Nyingma, is it's like you looking at your mind in the same way. You recognize the afflictive emotion that comes up, but now instead of just staying away from it, just don't go there, we're more skillful. We're actually using, it's like a little bit of homeopathy. You're taking a little bit, or like taking a shot of whiskey for a hangover. You're taking a little bit of the dog that bit you. In other words, we're recognizing, for instance, hatred. And instead of just staying away from it was good, well, we're still staying away from it in the sense that we're not engaging with it. But now the mind, there's a greater degree of stability and wisdom and skillfulness can take that anger arising, recognizing it clearly, and use it as a stimulus to practice its antidote, which in this case would be patient. So this is why the Dalai Lama says, this is basically what he's teaching publicly all over the world. So that's why we say, for instance, that your enemy is your best teacher, because you reckon it generates the anger, which allows you to practice the antidote, which is the path to Buddhahood. And someone said once, it's so funny because we hear that your enemy is your best teacher, but no, my friend is my best teacher. But then you realize, what is a friend? A friend is the person that puts up with your shortcomings. So they're kind of never pointing out what you really need to be working on. And of course, that's nice. But nonetheless, that's the conventional Mahayana. And now we've jumped into the Vajrayana, which in this book talks about transforming the negative emotions or recognizing the negative emotions. With this recognition, the image they give again is that someone's walking through a poisonous forest. And what is this poisonous forest? Well, these are our negative karmas. And we have this fruits of our negative karmas, which are poisonous fruits. And so in the example of the Vajrayana, we actually bite into that fruit itself. Not only can we use desire, so loving kindness and compassion conventionally, but now we can even use hatred, these tremendously powerful emotions, jealousy and arrogance, and just all these terrible things, which are completely abandoned in self-liberation, in which conventional Mahayana, which is the path of overwhelming loving kindness and compassion. But now in the Vajrayana, we're practicing on the nature of mind itself, but in its manifestations, you might say. So it's very skillful and very powerful. The Tibetans say this is the way to come to enlightenment in one lifetime, said to be particularly skillful and necessary in times of degeneracy, when society sort of sees non-virtues as being virtuous and sees virtues as being non-virtuous. Everything's upside down and the emotions are very rough. This is the time for the Vajrayana. But at the same time, there are dangers here because you're dealing with very powerful forces, the human mind, and to the degree that they're self-grasping, those things can be misused. So there are many protections, empowerments, bonds of trust between student and teacher, and amongst common students, Sangha, Vajra brothers and sisters, the people that have taken these commitments together. Lama Tarchin said, for instance, that the power of this connection, you might say, samaya, these bonds of trust. One can come to enlightenment on those alone. This is, Guru Yoga, this just complete identification with the mind of the Buddha and the skillfulness of it, because the only purpose of the outer Lama is to show you the inner Lama. So this is, very powerful, powerful path. But nonetheless, this samaya, this connection between teacher and student, is extremely precious. But also the samaya amongst the Vajra brothers and sisters. Lama Tarchin would say, the teacher as an enlightened being, that samaya is like a rubber band. The teacher will never let it stretch so far that it's going to break. But it's more dangerous among the other practitioners, because not being enlightened, they can break that samaya, which is an obstacle. All right, so we're starting on the spacious mind on page 58, where Kalu Rinpoche says the mind is described under three aspects: emptiness, clarity, and intelligence. If we meditate using as a foundation these three aspects in a vast and plentiful manner, whatever practices we do, such as mental calming, shamatha, superior vision, vipassana, and phases of development and completion, that's again the visualization practice, the creation stage, and the dissolution stage, the phases of development and completion of the Vajrayana deities, we will obtain great joy, great ease, and increase of efficiency. However, if we dwell in our ordinary perception, this is me, I am in this body, in a narrow manner, as if we were jammed in a narrow and steep-sided gorge from which we do not know how to exit, the same practices will meet with difficulties. Therefore, it is very important to know how to meditate. Even if the Lama who gives instructions on mental calming, superior vision, or deity meditation is an excellent teacher, and the disciple approaches these techniques with the mind turned on him or herself, the disciple will never see the qualities developed from these meditations. On the contrary, the disciple strongly risks becoming irritated by the Lama and resenting the teacher. This mind, as the union of emptiness, clarity, and intelligence or awareness, enters Buddhahood. However, it is also the mind that wanders in samsara. When we meditate, it is this mind that meditates. When conflicting emotions or thoughts arise, it is this mind that feels them. Nothing is experienced outside the mind, the spacious mind. Next, he's talking about the flying mind. If we meditate with a good understanding of the threefold nature of emptiness, clarity, and intelligence of the mind, We meditate with the freedom of a bird flying in the sky. Nothing obstructs its path. It can go wherever it wants. Our meditation then will be efficient, but in the opposite case, we are like a creature with many legs cramped in a very small space. While meditating, some people get headaches, others suffer eye pain, chest pains, or feel discomfort in other parts of their bodies. These pains come from an attitude of a closed mind. We can compare our mind with its three aspects to the ocean. Conflicting emotions and thoughts that arise are similar to waves. There are many waves in the ocean. However, they are only water, the same water as that of the ocean. Waves form in the ocean and are reabsorbed by the ocean. Similarly, all thoughts and emotions proceed from the mind and are reabsorbed by the mind. It can be useful to meditate on the seashore. From far away, small waves form, then increase in size, becoming huge and capable of destroying anything in their way. Waves return to the ocean and nothing remains of them. Emotions and thoughts arise in our mind, gain great power, and end by returning to emptiness. There is nothing left of them. Other emotions and thoughts arise, subsiding in their turn to allow for new ones. You should be skillful in meditating. When a powerful, almost irresistible desire arises in your mind, take the posture of meditation and dwell in a state of great openness. When desire arises, simply watch the mind in which this desire arises, and do not be distracted by anything else. The desire will be liberated by itself in emptiness. Each time it occurs in the mind, look at it in the same way and watch each time as it dissipates by itself. After repeated meditation like this, desire will liberate itself into primordial awareness. From then on, emotional manifestations will be beneficial and no longer will harm you. This is such amazing stuff, but you can see the need for faith. And again, not blind faith. Faith in Buddhism, I'm told the word in Sanskrit, I think is Shraddha, and I'm told that I don't even know the word in Tibetan, but I think it means more like confidence. So it's not a stupid faith. It's not an ignorant faith. It's not a blind faith because somebody told you about it or that you really even want to believe it. Rather, it's faith based on your own investigation, your own experience, your own analysis of your own mind. Certainly, there are authority figures, so to speak, that you rely on, but in the sense that you rely on a tennis coach. When you're playing tennis, a man seems to know more than you, seems to have some helpful things to say, and so you're working in that way. But it's very experiential, you might say. It's not stopping with faith is not the end point. Faith is again provisional, but at the same time, it's actually your Buddha nature manifesting. All right, so recognizing the essence. Let us experience what we have learned. Taking the correct meditation posture, let the mind rest in emptiness, clarity, and intelligence, awareness. Thoughts of desire, anger, or jealousy will no doubt occur. When they manifest, we remain in a state of simple recognition towards them. We do not have to think that they must disappear or that it is necessary to make them cease, but simply recognize their essence. Actually, they liberate themselves by themselves. In this meditation, all conflicting emotions are treated the same way. Even if they arise in great number, it is good. It is not necessary to suppress them. It suffices to recognize their essence, and this presents no difficulty. This is why we say that they liberate themselves by themselves. The main emotion that you encounter is probably desire attachment. If you can learn to process this emotion with this meditation, you will be able to use this approach for other emotions. Gampopa compared meditation to fire. The more one feeds wood to the fire, the more powerful and vivid the fire becomes. It is the same for the practitioner. The more conflicting emotions he or she encounters while meditating, the stronger primordial awareness will shine. And this is the essence of the Vajrayana. So everything that's arising in the mind becomes the meditation itself. After work, when you feel mentally and physically tired, if you establish your mind in this spacious and open state, fatigue will immediately disappear. You will feel relaxed and rested. When a strong conflicting emotion arises, if you place your mind in this state similar to space, the emotion will liberate itself by itself. This is extremely beneficial. I must say, though, here, he makes it sound too easy, I think. Something I've noticed with Tibetans, there's a certain kind of, this always comes out wrong, but there's a certain kind of directness and a simplicity of emotion. It's not a lack of sophistication, not at all. It's like we pile on what we call sophistication is often just, heads upon heads upon heads upon heads, and therefore missing the directness of it. So this ability to meditate, to look at your mind, look at the afflictive emotions. Again, this is where faith comes in, especially for us, because this practice of looking directly at it, you can do it 10,000 times, and there's not necessarily any kind of reaction. You're actually seeing, the mind can be so taken up in looking for some sort of result, for instance, that you're blinding yourself to any kind of actual result that's happening, or the immediate cause and effect. Because in this funny way, we don't have faith, in ourselves. It's like, if I'm doing this, this can't really be anything special. And in a way, it's not anything special. But, we have this narrative about ourselves that we keep going. But as you do this, that 10,000th time, you can have a very strong, especially if there's a very strong negative emotion, something's happened, like someone's died that you love, something that level of intensity. And if you remember to look at that emotion then, and if it dissolves, it sort of is an insight, and it changes everything, because you realize that negative mind state, powerful as it was, isn't all powerful. That there it is. It just dissolved right in front of you. I mean, it's just like a miracle. So it is first necessary to have a good understanding of this type of meditation. Then you should apply it. It is easier to talk about it than to understand it. But when one understands and does not practice it, one cannot benefit from it. After having attained awakening, the Buddha said, I found a dharma similar to nectar, deep, peaceful, simple, uncompounded, and radiant. As no one will understand what I could show, I will remain silent deep in the forest. Therefore, he remained absorbed in meditation. A few weeks later, the great gods of Vedic India, Brahma and Indra, supplicated him to teach human beings who had no one to guide them. Human beings were like blind people in samsara. Answering this request, the Buddha agreed to instruct them. All right. So then there's a question here. Someone's asking Kalu Rinpoche, this practice in which emotions liberate themselves by themselves, is that sufficient to lead us to awakening? Kalu Rinpoche, yes, it is possible, because it transforms emotions into wisdoms. On the level of awakening, it is more precisely called the 5 wisdoms. On the level of the paths, it's represented by the 5 masculine Buddhas. So this is getting into some of the symbology in these mandalas and deities and texts. The 5 wisdoms, they express it as, Vajra wisdom in the East, penetrating, it's associated with anger. So it's a transformation of anger into the wisdom of Vajrasattva. Again, like the diamond can cut everything, can't be cut itself, the hardest substance. So the Vajra wisdom in the East, the Ratna, the jewel wisdom in the south. So everything is the gold of a full harvest, the full benefit of the sun from the south, and all this richness. Ratna Sambhava is the Buddha that symbolizes that. Then in the west we have Amitabha, and this is the purification of desire, attachment, greed. And then in the north, Amoghasiddhi, the color green, which is jealousy being transformed. And the wisdom is, I think, all-accomplishing wisdom. And in the center is the Buddha family. So you have these 5 different points in the mandala, the center and the 4 surrounding ones. These are our 5 negative emotions. The grossest of all are 84,000 negative emotions, but transformed into these wisdoms, the 5 wisdoms. And then it gets even more detailed. So the symbology is extremely powerful to us when we're practicing with this emptiness, clarity, and awareness. All right, a question from another student. Rinpoche has explained that emotions arise in the mind and return to the mind. But if I refer to my own experience, I do not understand this very well. In this case, what is called mind is only a word. It does not designate anything in particular. Am I supposed to have a mind, but I cannot find it? Kalu Rinpoche says, to answer this question, we can quote the 3rd Karmapa. This is in the Karmakaya, obviously. 3rd Karmapa, Rangjug Dorje. This is the 3rd Karmapa. The mind. There is no mind. It is empty of mental essence. Being empty, at the same time, it is unbound and manifests in all things. May a perfect examination cut all indecision. And again, from the 3rd Karmapa, the mind is not existing. The victorious ones, the Buddhas, themselves do not see it. It is not non-existing. It is the universal foundation of samsara and nirvana. This is not a contradiction, but the middle way of unity. May I achieve thatness of the mind, lacking extremes. Now, Kalu Rinpoche again. I have given you methods such as the one whereby each time conflicting emotions, thoughts, or suffering appear, they liberate themselves by themselves. Now it depends on you whether you practice these methods or not. You have the choice of remaining fettered by conflicting emotions or releasing yourselves from them. As you want, you can either remain captive or place yourselves in a comfortable situation by allowing emotions to liberate themselves by themselves.
Frank,
Yeah.
Can you read the first one of the first response to the student from Kalu Rinpoche? Can you read that one again?
From the 3rd Karmapa?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. All right. So the student is asking, to Kalu Rinpoche, you've explained that emotions arise in the mind and return to the mind. But if I refer to my own experience, I do not understand this very well. In this case, what is called mind is only a word. It does not designate anything in particular. Am I supposed to have a mind, but I cannot find it? So Kalu Rinpoche quotes the 3rd Karmapa. The mind. There is no mind. It is empty of mental essence. Being empty, at the same time, it is unbound and manifests in all things. May a perfect examination cut all indecision. Okay?
Can you unlock that one a little more? That's it.
By practicing in this way,
Okay.
it becomes unlocked.
Okay, very good.
But it's pointing out that, we're limited in words. Whatever we say is not it. This is sort of the great paradox, you might say. But it's also a reflection of the first noble truth, the fact of suffering. All this stuff we do, trying to put a name on things, if we're not skillful with that, meaning that we don't realize the vast emptiness even of that name, then the name becomes kind of solidified in our mind, and these become actual things. It's like they have an absolute existence. And then we get tangled up in them, and we think we're going to improve the name of something by having a different name for it. All of these things. This is samsara.
All right, so Frank, so as these little bubbles of naming in nominal ideas. Oh, sorry. Okay, I might lose this now. Hold on. Okay.
Testing.
You're good.
Okay, so as all of these nominal ideas, things that exist on name only, as they bubble, as they effervesce up into our reality, when we start naming them, do we want to stop that process? I mean, is the awareness, or is it just that we watch these things bubble, that a part of us names it, and then we're not attached, and it just goes away? I mean, it's like, all of this is, form is emptiness, emptiness is form. And it's just like the mind is continuously, anytime the mind moves, it's creating something. So, is there a process of being able to nip that thought in the bud, where you stay and
there's nothing wrong with the thought.
Okay,
it's just the recognition of the thought.
Okay, so all right, so
and we don't suppress it.
Okay, right on. So
we're not trying to cut it off.
Okay.
There are thoughtless states, yes,
right.
But no one's trying to
but
be thoughtless.
Obviously, they don't remain, or do they?
Well, exactly.
Okay, right. Okay, so it does. Right, there we are.
You see it arise, the thought arises, and then it goes.
Back to the ocean.
And to the degree, the more clarity that one has too, one can see that what we even call like a certain kind of thought is just like sort of creating itself within itself again and again and again. It's not even one thought.
Habituation of
we say it's anger or depression or whatever we say, but it's actually an ongoing kind of movie, like frames.
Right.
Like Rachel. You had a question?
You.
I thought no. Sorry, put you on the spot.
It reminds me of Soren Kierkegaard, who said, if you label me, you negate me.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah.
Soren Kierkegaard.
Yeah, that's pretty good. It's your Danish heritage, Ken.
Whatever was rotten in Denmark, it certainly wasn't the food.
But this shows you the necessity of faith too, because it's like our whole process is we want to find something there. We're looking like for gold or something, and we just keep looking. And when do we stop looking? And it's almost like, you try to come up with, these teachers are so great at pointing the way. This thing with the karmapa is just like completely unsatisfying. Our samsaric mind wants somebody to tell you, just believe this, just do this, and then you're okay. You're part of the team, and things might be bad here, but it's all right. You're just going to heaven. It's all going to be okay. Don't worry about it. But the Buddha, to me, it's the greatest teaching that he hesitated to teach. He's not selling anything, but that's not to say that there aren't completely sincere and valuable people in other traditions. I'm not meaning it like that, but I just mean the profundity of the Buddhist teachings, and also the practicality that it's always about right now. What can you do with your mind right here? It's not so, but that's frightening. It's said that sometimes with the realization of emptiness, people have an experience of fear, because suddenly, this whole thing that we've based our big struggle on, looking everything through this self-grasping, and somehow if I can purify that, whatever, we have all these ideas. And it's so amazing to me. Our ego even wants to take credit for its own dethronement. It's just like, we are so amazing. It's like, you're meditating, you see it. You meditate for years, and yet I am meditating. That sense is so strong. And yet you can fool yourself. It happens. A teacher can say, here, just do this. Why don't you do 1,000,000 of these mantras? And it's just like, this is stupid. There's nothing to this. But you can, find moments when you've let down your guard, and then suddenly you see things purely. So, that comes in with faith too, but certainly with our teachers, the great ones especially, when you see just there's no bullshit happening. That to me, that's just so how do you have someone who was raised in a culture as different from ours as traditional classic Tibet, and then, go through welcome to modernity? We're just going to burn down all your monasteries and piss on your texts and everything, and the world's not going to do anything about it. And here you go, coming through that and then teaching to us. I mean, it's truly mind-boggling when as all of us do, as you meet Tibetans and you actually hear their personal stories, even ordinary lay people, Tibetans, I'm just so amazed that there isn't some sort of huge chip on their shoulder. And I mean, in our culture, you get power by being a victim now, and they could be the Maha victims if they wanted to be, but you don't get that vibe. Forgive my little rant.
Who was the Lama that always said, just do mantra?
That's it.
Is that Drew?
Drung Rinpoche, yeah.
I don't remember the whole story.
Yeah.
There's more story to that.
Yeah. Drung Rinpoche was, he's passed away now, was Drikung Yogi. And he was on a retreat in a cave when China invaded. He's kind of like, I jokingly say, he's the Rip Van Winkle of Tibet. He came out of his cave and Tibet was gone. But remarkable. And he happened to come to America, and he first went to Toronto and saw people there, and then he came down to Rochester, of all places, and some of the people from Toronto, Tashi Jamyanling and his wife Genyan, and their 3 daughters came down, and his daughters were like, what were they, 13, maybe 14, one of them, I can't remember. They were afraid of him because he was so traditional Tibetan, and he had been giving instruction to the kids, and they were all just nervous. But so he came in, and someone asked some question, like a question answer, right as it was starting, and he just said, "Forget about it. Just do mantra." And so we had a meditation supposedly system, and we did. He was going to do Nirmanakaya, Sambhogakaya, Dharmakaya. So we started out doing Guru Rinpoche's mantra for I don't know how long. It was long, out loud altogether. Then we moved on to Chenrezig, and then we ended up with Amitabha. And he was something else. So he went from here down to Arizona, and he had a great awakening with Gar Rinpoche. And he said Gar Rinpoche is the Buddha. And he went back to India. He was a yogi, with the hair like never cut, and he cut it all off, and taught until he passed away. But really a modern kind of saint for sure. Yeah. Now, ripples on water. In the Vajrayana, there are 3 ways of processing conflicting emotions in connection with the Tantras, called respectively outer, inner, and secret. The outer Tantras reject the emotions. The inner Tantras apply transformation, and the secret Tantras use the simple recognition of their essence. The Vajrayana represents the most direct path to escape the grasp of emotions. Until Marpa the translator, most practitioners did not place themselves in a situation where they externally protected themselves from emotions, but they processed these emotions internally. And Marpa was married, he's a father and a family, head of a family. But later, most practitioners were monks. Marpa was particularly known for his violent outbursts of anger. Milarepa's teacher. Marpa himself gave an example to help us understand his experience of desire and anger, and how this experience differed from how others perceived it. For people outside, he said, his emotions seemed to be drawings engraved on rock. For him, they were only ripples on the surface of water. Methods to liberate oneself from the emotions by rejection, transformation, or recognition of their essence belongs to the teachings of the Buddha. The Buddha did not, however, give them in a unique framework, but exposed various approaches in accordance with the various abilities of those to whom they were addressed each time proposing the most useful one. So this is important to understand, because the Buddha didn't come out again with systems. Rather, he responded directly to whoever he was responding to. It was later that they put all of this into systemization, for instance. But I find this extremely helpful because it gives us confidence. If you have this structure, this conceptual framework, first, I think it was very helpful for the Tibetans, because that's how it came from India to Tibet. The Tibetans sent their best and brightest to India for several centuries, and they experienced the full range of Buddhism at the peak of its cultural development in India, 1,500 years after the Buddha passed away, a little bit less. And they put it into these systems, you might say. And it's not the point of a system, but it's the point that it can give you confidence, just like we're talking here about self-liberation, conventional Mahayana leading to Buddhahood, the unconventional Mahayana practicing Buddhahood in the moment. Again, you feel it's like in America. I remember when I'm old enough that once upon a time you didn't see anybody jogging outside on the streets, and then jogging became a thing. And the next thing you knew, people were buying books about jogging.
Isn't that a soft jazz?
And in a sense, you don't need books about jogging, but in another sense, we do, So he's talking about the Buddha's experience with the Vajrayana, and he's going to tell the story of King Indra Buddhi. Extends an invitation to the Buddha. So this is the story. The time of Shakyamuni Buddha, King Indra Buddhi governed a powerful and opulent kingdom in the region of Kashmir. The king had a grandiose lifestyle. He surrounded himself with luxuries and pleasure. It is said that he enjoyed the company of 500 queens during the day and 500 different ones at night. One day, the king and his entourage went onto the terrace of the palace to contemplate the landscape. The king, looking at the sky, saw a strange group of golden birds in the distance. Having never seen birds such as these, he asked, "What kind of birds are these beautiful and majestic birds?" One of his ministers, who knew the Buddha and knew what miracles the Buddha could accomplish, answered, "Majesty, they are not birds, but the Buddha and 500 monks flying in the sky by their own power." The king was amazed. He asked if such a being would positively respond to an invitation. The minister replied that no doubt the Buddha would come and that there was no need to send a messenger. It was sufficient to sincerely pray, to make offerings on the terrace, and to burn incense. So this was done, and the Buddha and his retinue descended to the king's palace. Convinced of the greatness of the Buddha, who arrived by only being supplicated, the king offered presents and food and requested the Buddha to teach him the Dharma. The excellent guest expounded the Four Noble Truths, which are the truth of suffering, the origin of suffering, the cessation of suffering, and the path that leads to this cessation. He showed the painful and frustrating characteristics of the cycle of existence, insisting on renunciation and non-engagement in worldly activity. The king was saddened and surprised. If I must absolutely adopt such a rule of conduct to attain awakening, I will never get there. It is impossible in my situation. If there are some other instructions to liberate myself from the world without abandoning conflicting emotions, please have the kindness to impart them to me. If there is no other way, I simply have to renounce awakening. The Buddha, having the power to know people's minds, knew that the king was a being with superior spiritual capabilities. The Buddha became invisible to the monks and to the king's entourage, and made the monks and entourage invisible to the king. The Buddha himself changed his aspect, appearing before the king under the form of the tantric deity Guhyasamaja. He gave Guhyasamaja empowerment to the king, and at the same time He gave Guhya Samaja empowerment to the king, and at the same time, instructions on the true nature of mind and on Mahamudra. After the Buddha left, the king applied without interruption the instructions and the recognition of the mode of being of mind during any kind of external activity. After 12 years, he attained liberation. This is a specific example of the possibility of attaining awakening without rejecting ordinary life or outer play of emotions. It is said that the karmic connection existing between King Indrabhuti and his people was so great that after having attained awakening, he conferred initiation and instructions to all his subjects. So many achieved Mahamudra and attained liberation that it was said that this region of Kashmir had become completely depopulated. So we'll stop there for tonight. This was the introduction to his discussion of processing emotions to the Vajrayana. And next starts on page 67, which is compassion. Okay, so anything from anybody?
Yeah. Can you tell us about that deity?
Guhya Samaja?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Guhya means secret, but I don't know. Yeah.
Okay.
There's a whole classification of Tantra that is titled of a Tantra that is I think it's the Guhya Samaja Tantra, but I'm not sure. There's Guhya in there. Forgive me, I don't know.
And then the part back about the ripples on water.
Yeah.
It wasn't a realization, but it was like kind of an aha moment of, like you said, we meditate here for years and even decades with each other and like that. And we're like a nice little family here. And everyone here has probably seen everyone have almost every single emotion, right? And you guys have definitely seen me get angry, and if you've ridden in a car with me, especially. But I've noticed the last few years, especially right after the main part of COVID and started coming back to the Dharma, I still get really mad and I still get frustrated. Frustration to me is like this subtle energy that leads to anger. Because I feel like I don't really hate anybody, but I have this constant wavering of frustration going through my energy all the time. But I've noticed where they were saying, because Marpa seemed angry a lot and stern when he was teaching and things like that, that they just assumed because he was angry, it was like carving on a rock, and he was holding this anger, hanging on to it hanging on to grudges, hanging on to causes. And I look at myself and the path that I've been on, and I can feel the difference. I don't feel like when I get angry, it's less carved in a rock and it's more the ripples now. It's maybe it's the stone being skipped across the pond somewhere in the middle, but I'm headed in the right direction just from being here and just reading simple passages from this book that seem simple at first. I have all these kind of like aha moments, and I just wanted to share that with everyone, hoping that maybe all you have similar things. And there was one more thing I wanted to say about it. I can't remember what it was, but
well, if it comes, but truly, and that's the growth of faith. That's just it. I mean, there's different levels of faith, and you come to incontrovertible faith, where even though all the same baloney is going on in our mind, that's not throwing us off anymore. And also, I think the great wisdom of that is that we see just how powerful our habitual mind states are. And so what does that mean? Well, if I'm looking at myself, I realize other people are going through this too. And so there's a natural kind of compassion, not the phony kind of compassion, like I'm going to be compassionate.
Yeah.
There's no thought there at all. There's no ego clinging. It's just completely out of this pure experience of here I am, and all this malarkey going on. But now I know it's malarkey, but it's still pushing me around, but it's not 100%, because it's when we don't recognize that the danger's there.
I've been feeling generally happier, like experiencing this true happiness, and it's not this like aha bliss moment or anything, which you can get during meditation and stuff, but like just normal everyday, because I'm not hanging on to stuff. I go into work, there's things that really bother me about the company and certain executives and all that kind of stuff, but like I go into work, I get dumped a lot of work on, and then I'm just sitting there doing it, and all of a sudden I have a new intern, and the person that she was with, I noticed, just went, don't bother me, ask me questions if you have them, I got to get this done. And then it was like no one was there, and she was shy, and then all of a sudden she got assigned to me, and I'm like, why do you want to do this? And she told me, and then I'm like, do you want to try this? Do you want to do a mix here? And she's never worked on a giant expensive broadcast gear or anything, and she's like, yes. And you just see her light up. And just having the awareness and just being generally happy in the moment. I never, if I was still hanging on to a thing, I might have been like the other person, like, okay, great, yeah, whatever, like, I gotta get this done. And it's the same with just dealing with friends and everything and family, just enjoying the moments, and then more moments pop up. Whereas if we're hanging on to grudges, how brothers are, it's like,
yeah. Did you like that image that he had of being in a narrow gorge?
Yeah.
You can't get out of it, or you're some sort of animal with all sorts of legs, and you're like trapped somewhere.
When you said that, I actually had the wrong or the opposite response to what they said in the book was, well, if you're trapped, you just jump and open your arms and hope the water's deep, like.
Well, that's it, but that comes with
like a Garchen Rinpoche student.
Yeah, the spaciousness of the mind, to the degree that more spaciousness comes, like Lama Tarchin said, plenty of room to dance. I might not be feeling plenty of room to dance, but I'm feeling some spaciousness as opposed to what I once felt, which was being trapped.
Yeah.
Like no spaciousness.
And to be honest, I suffered from depression years ago, like severely. And that's, to me, that's one of the things about depression, was I felt trapped and I couldn't do anything. I couldn't go anywhere. And no matter what I said, it was wrong to no matter who I talked to. And it got to the point to where I couldn't even talk anymore. And it was like, trapped is a really good word. And I guess the gorge is a thing. And coming here, meeting you guys in Garchen Rinpoche, was just me going, here I go.
Yeah, right. The other one that strikes me is the cold hells. Because the hell is, hatred is the basic cause. And yet it's curious to me that they have hot hells. We're all into that. We all know that. But suddenly where all these cold hells come, to me, that's depression.
Yeah.
It's just directed in instead of directed out.
Rochester winners.
Yeah.
No,
right.
Kidding.
But yeah.
Great hell.
Great hell, right? And then there's that too. Then, it was Lama Tarchin once gave advice to someone too, saying that, you do, he was talking about a relationship difficulty. You do, you try to apply to their better spirit in that, and compassion and everything. You're with them, you're one with them, all of that, but you just do the best you can. But in the end, you just have to make your mind as vast as the sky, and like the clouds, accept what comes, because there are, we can't control outer the way that we would like.
That is the hardest part.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Anyone else?
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's very profound stuff, but it's so practical. And the thing that I notice is that, again, this quality of faith is just what keeps going, something, just keep going. because, again, in my own vastly limited experience, I'm just amazed at the level of ignorance. I mean, it's just amazing the power of that habitual mind.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just really ridiculous. A longer retreat is helpful because you just feel
Everything goes away in a long retreat eventually. Not everything, but like everything you were ever worried about in your life, all of a sudden you're forced to be in the moment, really.
Yeah.
Because you're in the middle of nowhere, depending on people you don't know.
Yeah.
And
the spontaneous things that can happen are very encouraging, because you realize you have some sort of plan in your mind that's not going according to plan.
oh,
And
yeah,
yet something beneficial happens and you realize, I just get out of the way, and it happened, but we just think we have to control.
It's almost like it's done on purpose, but it's not like it's planned by the teachers or anything, but it's almost like this auspicious unfolding of these obstacles that you never would have had if you weren't going to a retreat. I mean, it's really, and they're all teachings. Like,
Yeah.
the one that I talked to you a long time ago about jealousy, like, and none of us could talk and just come here and sit. And I'm like, to a living Buddha, I'm like, no, I don't want to, because I just felt all of this energy, and it's just my mind. And whether it was true or not true, or just my mind, I should have just gone and sat there.
And with, again, just that continuation, just the consistency and just keeping going with that basic faith. I mean, what happens is that with time, you look back and you see really beneficial things happen completely outside of your program, and that you didn't even recognize necessarily at the time. So that thing that I posted a couple of days ago, Trungpa Rinpoche passed away, this great Lama of the Karma Kagyu. And, here were Gretchen and I in India in 1981. And, we had this plan. We were going to go to the 4 spots of the Buddha in India. And that was the whole deal. And that would have been sufficient and enough and wonderful. And so we were at Kushinagar. So we went first, I remember a little bit differently, but we went first to Sarnath, the first teaching. And it was quite a struggle to get there because we had been in Western India and then down to Bombay, and then took a train all the way across India to Varanasi, Sarnath, and went to the deer park there. So that was, it was moving. It was wonderful. And then we went further east to Bodh Gaya, the place of his awakening. That was very moving too. That was our first experience with the Tibetans. We found ourselves, it was the full moon, and they had Ling Rinpoche, who was the Dalai Lama's tutor, was giving a teaching. We just stumbled into this, And what struck me were all the Tibetans under the moonlight with these, third world kind of light bulbs strung up around, but this big, right where the Buddha came to enlightenment, he's giving this teaching. And I remember seeing a couple of little Tibetan, little kid lamas, and they were like running around sort of like snapping towels at each other. They were not with the program at all. But this whole big thing of these people who were, there and obviously spiritual, but not churchy at all. Just, really, really. And I was just curious. We couldn't understand a word. It was all in Tibetan. But from there, we took a train up to Kushinagar, where he passed away. And that too was moving, and we thought we'd stay in this Chinese temple. And we walked to this temple, and you could rent a place, and they showed us where we'd be sleeping. Well, it was just a little cutout in the wall, poured concrete shelf. Make yourself comfortable. And we were like looking at this, and a fellow who we had seen at Bodh Gaya but hadn't talked to, he was at Kushinagar too at the same time, and he is overseas Chinese. He was a student of the Karmapa, and he looked at this shelf too at the same time as us, and he looked at us and said, "Would you like to get a hotel?" Okay. So we did. We got this hotel, and it was the the Indian government had these what are called rest houses around India, and they're nice, and they have anyways. It was very nice. It was very simple but very nice, and excellent food. I mean, it was just really a delight, especially thinking in comparison to sleeping on that concrete. But nonetheless, so we were talking with this man, Yao Yu Kit was his name, and he was again a merchant man, sailed all over the world. But we were asking him questions because we knew nothing about Tibetan Buddhism or the Vajrayana at all. And then he finally said, you know what, I'm going up to Kathmandu to see one of my teachers. Why don't you come along? So we said, well, okay, we did. Because we were going to Lumbini anyway, which is in Nepal, where the Buddha was born. So we went to Lumbini. And then after Lumbini, going towards Kathmandu, he said, why don't we stop here, Nama Buddha, where the Buddha is said to be this place where the Buddha gave his body, the Bodhisattva gave his body to the starving tigress. So we drove up through this rhododendron forest. I mean, these giant rhododendron trees. Well, I mean, they're not giant trees, but for rhododendrons, they're giant. And here's this temple at the top of this place. And he was taking us around to different, statues, especially Chenrezig, Sig, because I think he thought we had some sort of a need. But nonetheless, I was kind of doing like perfunctory kind of devotions, because I guess that's what you do. He showed us what to do. And they said, would you like to have an interview with the Lama? And I was thinking like, well, and ask what? I don't know. So he set it up anyway. And so we went. And so here we were with this Lama who seemed very simple. And I was, got my arrogant flag waving. So I asked him, as a good Western meditator, what's the point of all these teachings and all these texts and all this stuff? I mean, why don't we just meditate and we don't have to do any of this stuff? Aren't these concepts, aren't they actually an obstacle? And he said, they're just guideposts, shows you when you're off the path. I really liked that answer because it was so simple and direct, and we had no idea who he was. It must have been, 1981. Yeah, literally 30 years later. 30 years later. Yeah, it's about 2011. Was reading one of Trungpa Rinpoche's books. Could have been earlier, don't know for sure. It was a long time afterwards. And reading one of Trungpa Rinpoche's books, and it suddenly struck me that he was the Lama who had been there. I just felt so moved because these things, and then I looked it up, and lo and behold, you go to his website, here's Nama Buddha, this is his place. So it was him. But, there was no, it wasn't Frank doing it. That's the thing. You start to see from your own stumbles and your own, but your good intentions and all of that, and even trying to label your intentions in some way that sound good to other people. You start to see that there's a river flowing here that's subterranean, and there's something very positive going on that you don't have any control over, but you can kind of dip into it if you want to, or you can have faith in it and you can stop fighting it, so to speak. Or stop trying to control it. It's like that Indian teaching, that people come to the ocean and it's completely up to you. You can take as much water as you want. You can walk out with a huge bucket of water, or you can have a little bit of thimbleful of water. But it's up to you. It's not the fault of the ocean. It's completely up to us. But it's the fact, it's the confidence, it's somehow despite ourselves believing that there is an ocean. That's the sadness that I see in the modern world. People, they've forgotten about the ocean. So for us to have had all of this arise for us, certainly, I don't think there's anybody. Is there anybody here who said, hey, Drika and Kagyu, that's what I want? I didn't know we could pronounce the word.
No, I'm still kind of resistant.
It shows the spontaneity of it. It actually shows that we're involved in something that's greater than our little conceptual mind. That is, it's a validation again and again and again. And certainly, Rinpoche. I just, I can't believe it. I just can't believe it because it's so immediately beneficial, even in ways that we can't see. Someone, who, it's not about distance. It's not about being in Arizona. It's not about not being in Arizona. It's not about whatever. The connection is there. Proof of the pudding is here. It just can't be. When you see the rareness in the universe, every time I see those pictures of the Hubble space, is that the new one? The new one's the Webb, right? Hubble and Webb. Wow.
Webb.
I mean, you get a sense of the, the vastness. It's amazing.
But that's just our mind, right? It's just, we're all here observing it.
Yeah.
And it's just another piece of technology that is made by our collective mind going up to, and the farther we go out, it's just our mind going out more.
Yeah, it's all our mind. And
not like my mind,
right,
or our mind, but
right,
just the mind.
Right. And the fact that the Buddha saw that so long ago, the Buddhists have had no problems with, a lot of scientific discoveries have been kind of challenging for a lot of religious traditions because, again, it's Galileo again.
Because we're the best.
Yeah, well, where the earth is the whole thing and all of that. But when you read, the old sutras, and you just go, oh my goodness, they had that vastness thing going on. Yeah.
Reading a book many years ago, The Demon Haunted World by Carl Sagan. And he was interviewing the Dalai Lama. And he asked the Dalai Lama, what if science discovered something that contradicted what Buddhism teaches? And with no hesitation at all, the Dalai Lama said, well, Buddhism would just have to change.
Right.
And Sagan was totally taken aback by his open mind to the whole thing. It was quite interesting.
Right. Well, it's also that quote from Kanze, who I like, is, he said, I regard the teachings of Chandrakirti and Dharmakirti as being the least offensive. It's something like that. It's like he's such a curmudgeon. But that's all it is. I mean, you can't say the teachings themselves. Kanzi. Yeah, right. Anybody else? Right. I know I'm a broken record. Okay. All right. So let's conclude tonight. We dedicate the merit from the questioning, the insights, the effort to understand, the opening our hearts, the loving kindness and compassion directed towards all. May each and every one be free. Swaha. Okay. Thank you, Zoomers.
Thank you, Frank.
Yeah.
This is so awesome. This is so awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's a wonderful thing that we're doing.